The call came just as I was finishing my presentation at work. Mom's voice trembled through the speaker, a sound I'd grown too familiar with over the years. "Arden, please come home. It's Lark again." I closed my laptop, already reaching for my keys. "What happened?" "Just. Please hurry." The 15-minute drive to my parents' house stretched like elastic, each traffic light conspiring against me. When I pulled into the driveway, the first thing I noticed was the scattered rose petals on the front steps. Pale pink, torn and trampled. Inside, the scene hit me like a physical blow. Grandmother Cressida's antique vase, the one she'd brought from Europe decades ago, lay shattered across the hardwood floor. The roses it had held were strewn everywhere, their stems snapped and petals crushed. In the center of it all stood Lark, mascara streaking down her face, her hands clenched into fists. "She did it on purpose," Mom whispered, hovering near the kitchen doorway. Dad stood behind her, his face a mask of helplessness. "She said Jasper bought flowers for his secretary." I stepped carefully around the broken porcelain. "Lark," my sister's head snapped up, her eyes wild. "Don't use that tone with me, Arden. I'm not one of your business projects you can just fix." "I didn't say. You didn't have to." She kicked a piece of the vase, sending it skittering across the floor. "Always so perfect, aren't you? Perfect job, perfect boyfriend, perfect daughter." Mom made a small sound of distress. "Please, girls. I came because Mom called," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Let me help clean this up and we can talk." Lark laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "Of course you came. Saint Arden, rushing in to save the day. Did you know Grandmother promised that vase to me? Said I'd get it on my wedding day. That was a lie. I'd been there when Cressida told us the story of the vase, how it would go to the eldest granddaughter. But arguing would only make things worse. I reached for the dustpan under the sink, but Lark blocked my path. "Don't touch anything. This isn't your house anymore. You don't live here." "No," I said quietly, "I don't." "Then why are you always here? Every time something happens, they call you. Poor little Lark can't handle anything on her own. Better call Big Sister." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "I saw the way you looked at Jasper at Christmas. Don't think I didn't notice." The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. I'd barely spoken 2 words to her fiancé at the holiday gathering. But there was something in her tone, something that made me look closer at her trembling hands and dilated pupils. "Lark, have you taken something?" She recoiled as if I'd slapped her. "There it is. Always judging, always assuming the worst." She spun toward our parents. "Are you hearing this? Your perfect daughter thinks I'm on drugs." Dad finally stepped forward. "Arden, maybe you should go. We can handle this." I stood there, surrounded by broken pieces of family history, and felt something shift inside me. This scene, the accusations, the enabling, the careful dance around Lark's feelings, it was all so familiar. But something was different this time. Maybe it was the way Mom couldn't meet my eyes, or how Dad's hands shook as he reached for the broom. "Okay," I said, backing toward the door. "I'll go." As I left, I heard Lark's voice, soft and venomous. "That's right, run away. It's what you're good at." I didn't stop until I reached my car, where I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. My phone buzzed, a text from Grandmother Cressida. "Come see me tomorrow. We need to talk." Grandmother Cressida's house smelled like Earl Grey and old books, a comforting constant in my shifting world. She sat across from me at her kitchen table, her fingers wrapped around a delicate teacup that had survived decades of family drama. "Your mother called," she said, studying my face. "Told me about the vase." "I'm sorry about." "Don't." Cressida waved her hand dismissively. "It was just a vase. I'm more concerned about what's happening with you and Lark." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Cressida's expression tightened. "Ah, that would be your parents. I hope you don't mind, dear, but I thought we should clear the air." My stomach dropped as Mom and Dad filed in, followed by Lark. She'd traded yesterday's mascara streaks for perfect makeup, wearing the innocent expression she'd perfected since childhood. "Arden." Mom's voice held forced cheerfulness. "We didn't expect to see you here." "That's because I invited her," Cressida said, pouring more tea. "Lark, dear, I believe you have something to say about yesterday?" Lark's lower lip trembled. "I'm so sorry about the vase, Grandmother. I was just emotional. Jasper's been working such long hours, and when I saw those flowers on his secretary's desk, the flowers were for his mother's birthday." I cut in, unable to stop myself. "I know because Theo works in the same building. He saw Jasper picking them up." The room went silent. Lark's face flushed, but before she could speak, Dad cleared his throat. "Actually, we wanted to discuss something else." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. "We found this while cleaning up yesterday." My blood ran cold as I recognized the envelope, an old college acceptance letter I'd hidden years ago. The one to the prestigious art program in Paris that I'd turned down because Lark had her first major breakdown the week I was supposed to leave. "You never told us about this," Mom said softly. "Full scholarship, too." Lark snatched the letter, her eyes scanning the page. "Paris? You were going to abandon us for Paris?" Her voice rose. "While I was struggling. While I needed you. You always needed me," I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. Every time I tried to build something for myself, there was another crisis, another emergency, another reason I had to stay. "Oh, so it's my fault you gave up on your dreams?" Lark's laugh was brittle. "Should I tell them about the real reason you stayed? About that night you came home drunk and totaled Dad's car?" My head snapped up. "What are you talking about? Senior year, remember? You were so upset about not going to Paris, you went out drinking. Wrapped Dad's car around a tree." Lark's eyes gleamed. "Only it wasn't you driving, was it?" The lie was so bold, so perfectly crafted, I almost admired it. I'd never touched Dad's car that night. I'd been home, holding Lark's hair back as she threw up after mixing alcohol with her medication. "That's not," I started, but Mom cut me off. "Arden, is this true? Is that why you've been so distant lately?" "Guilty about the accident." Cressida set down her teacup with a sharp clink. "Interesting story, Lark. Especially since Arden was with me that entire night, helping me organize your grandmother's jewelry for the estate sale." The certainty in Cressida's voice made Lark falter, just for a moment. But it was enough. I saw the flash of panic in her eyes, the quick recalculation. "I must be thinking of something else," she said smoothly. "Everything from that time is so fuzzy, with the medications and all." Dad rubbed his temples. "Maybe we should discuss this another time." "Yes," Mom agreed quickly. "We're all tired." As they hustled Lark toward the door, she turned back to me. "By the way, Jasper and I are having an engagement dinner next week. You'll come, won't you? Bring Theo. I'd love to hear more about what he sees at the office." The threat was subtle but clear. This wasn't over. Cressida waited until they left before reaching for my hand. "My dear," she said quietly, "I think it's time we talked about your sister's real problem." Theo's laptop screen glowed in the darkness of our apartment as he pulled up the security footage from his office building. "Are you sure you want to see this?" he asked, his hand hovering over the keyboard. I nodded, thinking about Cressida's words from earlier. Sometimes the kindest people cause the most damage by enabling bad behavior. The video showed Jasper entering the building last Tuesday, with a woman who wasn't his secretary. They emerged 2 hours later, his hand on the small of her back. The timestamp matched exactly when Lark had called me, hysterical about him working late. "There's more," Theo said quietly. "The company's been investigating some irregularities in the accounts Jasper manages. Nothing concrete yet, but..." My phone buzzed, a text from Lark. "Need you at Mom and Dad's. Emergency. Don't tell anyone." At my parents' house, I found Lark alone in the kitchen, calmly stirring a cup of tea. "No crisis in sight. You're getting better at coming when I call," she said, not looking up. "Did you bring what I asked for? What are you talking about?" She slid her phone across the counter, showing me an email draft addressed to Jasper's boss. "I know Theo's been digging into Jasper's work. Make him stop, or this email about your boyfriend accessing private security footage goes out." The familiar surge of protective anger rose in my chest, but something was different this time. Maybe it was remembering Cressida's steady gaze, or the weight of all the sacrificed opportunities. "You know what's interesting, Lark? I've been going through old photos." I pulled out my phone, showing her a picture from 3 years ago. "This is from the day you claimed you were hospitalized for exhaustion. But look at the timestamp. You were actually at that resort with your college roommate." Her fingers tightened around the teacup. "You've been investigating me? I've been paying attention. Like how you told Mom you needed rent money last month because you lost your job, but I saw your Instagram posts from your office. Or how you convinced Dad that Jasper's business was struggling, right before he gave you that loan. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're not just lying to them anymore. You're protecting someone who's probably committing fraud, all while threatening my boyfriend's career." Lark's composure cracked. "Jasper loves me. He wouldn't. Like he loved you when he was with that woman in his office on Tuesday?" The teacup shattered against the wall, tea leaving dark streaks on the wallpaper. "You're trying to ruin everything. You've always been jealous because Mom and Dad love me more." "No, Lark. They don't love you more, they fear you more. There's a difference." She lunged for her phone, but I was faster. Go ahead, tell them whatever story you want. I've got proof of everything. The fake hospital stays, the double-dipped rent money, all of it. I wonder what Jasper would think about your creative storytelling. You wouldn't dare. Try me. I'm done protecting you from consequences. The front door opened and Mom's voice called out, Girls? Is everything okay? Lark's face transformed instantly, tears welling up. Mom! Arden's threatening me. She's trying to destroy my relationship with Jasper. But before she could continue her performance, another voice cut through. That's enough, Lark. Grandmother Cressida stepped into the kitchen, her eyes sharp. I think it's time we all had a very honest conversation about the past few years. Lark's gaze darted between us, calculating. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. The fear of someone whose carefully constructed world was about to collapse. You can't prove anything, she whispered. Cressida placed a thick folder on the counter. Actually, my dear, we can. The email from Harrison and Shaw Architecture sat unopened in my inbox while I stared at my phone. 3 missed calls from Mom, 2 from Dad, and a string of texts from Lark. You've ruined everything. Happy now? My office door creaked open, and my boss Sarah poked her head in. The partners need an answer about Singapore by tomorrow. 2-year contract, full creative control. It's a career maker, Arden. I nodded, thinking about the folder Cressida had dropped on the counter yesterday. The one that had sent Lark running from the house and my parents into shocked silence. I just need a little more time. Time isn't something we have much of, Sarah said gently. The client. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Theo. Jasper just got escorted out of the building. Things are about to get messy. I grabbed my keys, but before I could leave, Dad appeared in my office doorway, looking older than I'd ever seen him. We need to talk, he said, his voice rough. About what was in that folder. Sarah tactfully excused herself as Dad sank into the chair across from my desk. He pulled out a familiar piece of paper. My old acceptance letter to Paris. I've been going through everything, he said. All the times we called you home, all the opportunities you gave up. The money Lark convinced us she needed. He cleared his throat. The company's pressing charges against Jasper. They found evidence that Lark was involved in. I don't want to know. I cut him off, turning to the window. The Singapore contract waited on my screen, cursor blinking. She's your sister, Arden. She needs help, real help this time. Like the help she needed when I got that scholarship? Or when I was offered that residency in New York? My hands gripped the windowsill. Every time I tried to build something for myself, you and Mom would say, Lark needs help. But it was never enough, was it? We made mistakes, Dad admitted. But running away to Singapore isn't the answer. I turned back to face him. Running away? Is that what you think I'm doing? Your mother is devastated. With Lark facing possible charges and now you wanting to leave. I'm not leaving because of Lark. I'm leaving because for once in my life, I want to build something that isn't about fixing someone else's mess. My phone lit up with a text from Cressida. Lark's at my house. She's asking for you. Your choice, dear. Dad saw the message. Please, Arden. Just talk to her. I looked at the Singapore contract again, then at the Paris letter in Dad's hands. 2 dreams, 2 decades apart. The first sacrificed for family obligation, the second waiting for my answer. I'll go see Lark, I said finally. But first, I need to do something. I turned to my computer and began typing my response to Harrison and Shaw. Dad watched, his face falling as he realized what I was doing. You're accepting it. Yes. But what about? That's the point, Dad. For once, this isn't about what anyone else needs. It's about what I need. He stood slowly, the Paris letter crumpling slightly in his grip. Your mother will say you're being selfish. Maybe it's time someone was. I hit send before I could change my mind. I'll go see Lark now. But whatever she says, whatever crisis she's created, I'm still getting on that plane in 3 weeks. As we walked out, Sarah caught my eye and gave me a subtle thumbs up. I straightened my shoulders, feeling lighter than I had in years, even as my phone buzzed with another message from Cressida. Hurry. Your sister says she has something to tell you. Something about Theo. Cressida's house was dark when I arrived, except for a single lamp in the living room. Through the window, I could see Lark sitting on the couch, her face illuminated by her phone screen. No sign of grandmother Cressida. The door was unlocked. Inside, Lark didn't look up as I entered, just kept scrolling through what looked like emails on her phone. Did you know Theo's been looking for other jobs? My steps faltered. What? Singapore firms, specifically. She turned the phone toward me, showing an email thread. He's been in talks with them for months. long before your offer came through. The timestamps confirmed it. Theo had been corresponding with Singapore firms since January. My offer had come just last week. Where's grandmother Cressida? Book club. Lark's smile was sharp. I knew you wouldn't come if it was just me. But I thought you should see this before you throw away everything here for him. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Probably Theo, wondering where I was. I left it unanswered. You hacked his email? Jasper did, actually. Before everything. She swallowed hard. He thought I should know what your boyfriend was planning. Funny how the people closest to us keep secrets, isn't it? I moved to the window, watching shadows lengthen across Cressida's garden. Like you kept secrets about Jasper's fraud? That was different. I did it for love. She stood, crossing to where I stood. But Theo, he was planning to leave you behind. The only reason he supported your Singapore move was because it fit his plans. You're lying. Am I? Check your phone. I bet he's texting you right now, trying to explain before you find out from someone else. The firm announced his hiring today. My phone had gone silent, but a notification lit up the screen. A LinkedIn update congratulating Theo on his new position. You know what the worst part is? Lark's voice softened. I actually felt bad about showing you this. The old me would have held on to it, used it somehow. But I'm trying to change, Arden. That's what I wanted to tell you. I laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet room. Change? By ambushing me with stolen emails? By telling you the truth? Something you're always preaching about. She touched my arm. Stay. Help me fix things with Mom and Dad. We can face the legal stuff together, be real sisters again. For a moment, I saw it. The future she was offering. Staying would be easier. Everyone would praise my loyalty, my forgiveness. The perfect daughter, the supportive sister. Then I looked at her hand on my arm and noticed her phone was still recording. You're still trying to manipulate me, I said quietly. You thought if you exposed Theo's secret, showed a moment of vulnerability, I'd give up Singapore to help you handle the fraud charges. She snatched her hand back. I'm trying to protect you. No, you're trying to protect yourself. But here's what you don't understand. I moved toward the door. Even if everything you showed me about Theo is true, it doesn't change my decision. I'm going to Singapore for me, not for him. You'll regret this, she called after me. When you're alone in Singapore, when everything falls apart. Maybe, but it'll be my choice, my regret. I paused at the door. For what it's worth, I hope you do change, Lark. But I won't set myself on fire to keep you warm anymore. Outside, my phone lit up with Theo's name. Behind me, I heard Lark start to cry, real tears this time, not the performative ones I'd grown up with. I got in my car and drove away, leaving both calls unanswered. The farewell dinner was Mom's idea. One last family meal, she'd said, as if good intentions could patch 5 years of fractures. I sat at our old dining room table, watching Lark arrange herself like a tragedy in waiting, while Mom fussed with the centerpiece and Dad studied his wine glass. 2 weeks until Singapore, Lark announced to no one in particular. Have you told them about Theo yet? Mom's hands stilled on the flowers. What about Theo? I cut my chicken with precise movements, the knife scraping against china. Theo and I are taking a break. A break? Dad looked up. But I thought he was going with you? He is going to Singapore, Lark said. Just not with Arden. That's enough, I warned, but she was already pulling out her phone. Show them the emails, Arden. Show them how your perfect boyfriend was planning his escape long before you got your offer. Her voice took on that familiar wounded tone. Unless you're still protecting him, like you used to protect me? Mom sank into her chair. Arden, what is she talking about? It doesn't matter. I set down my knife. What matters is I'm still going. Alone. Mom's voice cracked. First we lose Lark to these horrible fraud charges, and now you're running away too. I'm not running away. The words exploded out of me, sending the water glasses trembling. I'm finally running toward something. My something. Not Lark's crisis, not Theo's plans, not your expectations. Mine. While I face jail time, Lark whispered. While our family falls apart. Dad cleared his throat. The lawyers think if you testified about what you knew regarding Jasper's dealings. I didn't know anything, I said, but Lark laughed. Really? All those late nights Theo spent reviewing company documents? The conversations you must have heard. She leaned forward. The prosecution would love to know what you knew and when. One sister's testimony against her sister's fiancé. It's practically Shakespearean. The room tilted slightly. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you a choice. Lark's eyes gleamed. Stay. Help me fight this. Be the sister you always claimed to be. Or go to Singapore and hope the investigation doesn't follow you there. Mom reached for my hand. Darling, maybe a delay wouldn't be. Stop. I pulled away, standing so abruptly my chair toppled backward. Just stop. All of you. You don't want me to succeed. You want me to stay small enough to manage. That's not true, Dad protested, but his eyes slid away from mine. Isn't it? When I got into art school, Lark had her first breakdown. When I was offered that residency, she needed rehab. Every time I tried to grow, something pulled me back. But not anymore. Lark stood too, her composure cracking. You think you're so much better than us? At least I admit what I am. You pretend to be the perfect sister while judging us all, planning your escape. Perfect? I laughed, the sound foreign to my own ears. I've spent my entire life trying to fix this family. I gave up everything to be what you needed. And you know what? It was never enough. I was never enough. The silence that followed felt like glass about to shatter. Mom was crying silently, Dad staring at his hands, Lark's face a mask of calculated hurt. If you leave now, Lark said quietly, don't come back. I looked at each of them, my enabling mother, my passive father, my manipulative sister, and felt something final settle in my chest. Okay, I said and walked out of my childhood home for the last time. In my car, my phone lit up with a message from Cressida. Whatever they said, remember, sometimes the bravest thing isn't staying to fight. Sometimes it's knowing when to save yourself. But as police lights suddenly flashed in my rearview mirror, I wondered if I'd waited too long to learn that lesson. The police station's interview room felt smaller with each passing hour. Detective Chun set another cup of coffee in front of me, her expression unreadable. Let's go through this again, she said. When did you first become aware of the financial irregularities at your boyfriend's company? Before I could answer, the door opened. Lark walked in, followed by our parents and her lawyer. She'd been crying, perfectly timed tears that left her makeup intact. I need to change my statement, she announced. Detective Chen's eyebrows rose. MS. Hayes, this interview is. Arden didn't know anything. Lark's voice shook. I lied before. I was angry about Singapore, about her leaving. She pulled out her phone, setting it on the table. I have proof. Recordings of conversations with Jasper, where I helped him hide things from her. From everyone. Mom gasped. Dad reached for her hand. Why are you doing this? I asked, studying my sister's face. Because it's true. Lark met my eyes. And because grandmother Cressida showed me something today. The trust fund she set up for me when I was born. The one I've been using for lawyers? She showed me the conditions. A bitter laugh escaped her. I only get it if I tell the truth. All of it. She knew Arden. She knew someday I'd need this push. Detective Chun was reviewing something on her tablet. These recordings corroborate our other evidence. MS. Hayes, Arden, you're free to go. But we'll need your sister to continue her statement. Wait, I said, standing. Lark, don't. She held up a hand. Don't make this harder. Just go to Singapore. Build something real. I need to learn how to do that too, even if it's the hard way. Mom stepped forward. Darling, we can fight this. No, Mom. Lark's composure cracked. That's the problem. You and Dad always help me fight the wrong things. I blamed Arden for being perfect, but she was just whole, while I was breaking everything, including myself. You're not broken, I said quietly. You're just lost. Maybe. She smiled, a real smile this time. But I can't find my way by following your path anymore. Or by trying to destroy it. Detective Chun cleared her throat. We need to proceed. As I gathered my things, Dad touched my arm. We should have seen it sooner. Should have protected you both better. You can't protect someone from themselves, I said. Sometimes you have to let them fall. Like you're letting me? Lark asked. Like I'm letting us both be free. At the door, I turned back one last time. Lark sat at the interview table, her lawyer whispering in her ear, our parents hovering uncertainly nearby. She looked smaller somehow, but also more real than I'd seen her in years. Lark, she looked up. That trust fund? Grandmother set one up for me too. Same conditions. Understanding dawned in her eyes. That's why you started telling the truth. That's why I started living it. Outside, the evening air felt clean possible. My phone buzzed with a text from the Singapore firm, confirming my start date. Below it was a message from Cressida. Truth isn't always pretty, dear. But it's the only foundation worth building on. I took a deep breath and began composing a reply to both messages. It was time to build something new, brick by honest brick. Behind me, through the station window, I saw Lark straighten her shoulders and begin to speak. 6 months into my Singapore life, I stood in my apartment, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and the soft glow of dawn. On my laptop screen, grandmother Cressida adjusted her webcam, the familiar walls of her study behind her. "The hearing went well," she said, sipping her tea. 3 years probation, mandatory therapy, and restitution payments. Lark's lawyer says it's better than they hoped for. I nodded, watching the city wake up outside my window. "And how is she?" "Different. Quieter. She's been helping me organize old family photos. Reddittopposts. She found the one of you two at the beach, the summer before everything changed. Remember? I did. 12 and 7, building sandcastles that the tide would claim. Before the competition, before the lies, before we learned to use truth as both weapon and shield. Your mother called yesterday," Cressida continued. "They're thinking of selling the house. Too many memories? Too many ghosts." She set down her cup. "Lark asked about you. Said she's been writing letters but hasn't sent them." A notification popped up on my phone, the architecture firm's logo appearing with a meeting reminder. My first solo project presentation in an hour. "Tell her." I traced the city's skyline with my finger. "Tell her I'm still collecting pieces of broken vases." Cressida smiled, understanding. "And what will you build with them?" "I don't know yet. But something real." After we disconnected, I opened my email to find a message from Theo. He'd taken a position in Hong Kong instead of Singapore, his own form of truth-telling perhaps. The subject line read, "You were right." Below that was an email from Mom, with photos of my childhood artwork she'd found while packing. "You always saw beauty in broken things," she wrote. "I'm sorry we couldn't see that about you." My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, my boss. "Design meeting in 45. Ready to show them what you can do." I looked around my apartment, at the architectural sketches pinned to walls, the half-finished paintings I'd finally allowed myself to create, the pieces of my new life taking shape. On my desk sat a small box Cressida had sent last week. Inside were fragments of her broken vase, carefully wrapped. "Sometimes," her note had read, "we need to break before we can rebuild." I picked up a piece now, its edge smooth from years of handling. In the early morning light, I could see hairline cracks running through it like roads on a map, each one leading somewhere new. My phone buzzed again, an unknown number. A text appeared. "Found this in my therapy journal. Thought you should have it." Below was a photo of a child's drawing. 2 girls building a sandcastle. Signed in Lark's crooked 7-year-old handwriting. I didn't respond, but I saved the image. Some conversations needed time, like cement needs time to set. Some foundations had to be rebuilt slowly, deliberately, with room for both strength and fracture. Opening my presentation files, I added a final slide, a design that incorporated visible repair lines in its structure. Golden seams running through glass and steel. Beauty in the broken places, truth in the telling. Outside, Singapore's morning traffic hummed like distant waves. Somewhere across the ocean, my sister was learning to build something new. Our parents were learning to let go. And I was learning that sometimes the strongest things we build are the spaces between what was broken and what could be. I picked up my keys and headed for the door. It was time to create something of my own. I wasn't meant to overhear the conversation that would change everything. Standing outside my father's study, I froze at the sound of my name, my hand still raised to knock. Through the gap in the door, I could see my sister Sarah perched on the leather armchair. Her perfect posture a stark contrast to her husband Jackson's lounging stance beside her. "Alara's college fund is the most practical solution," my father said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of finality. "The art school tuition would have been wasted anyway." My mother's bangles clinked as she gestured. "Conrad's right. Sarah's business plan is solid. This investment could secure both your futures." I pressed my palm against the wall to steady myself, the cool surface grounding me as my world tilted sideways. The fund I'd spent years building through summer jobs and careful saving. Gone just like that. "Are you sure she'll understand?" Sarah's voice held a note of concern that might have fooled someone who didn't know her better. "I mean, she's been talking about that art school forever." "Your sister will adjust," my father replied. "She always does." I pushed the door open, making them all jump. "Were you planning to tell me, or would I have found out when my tuition check bounced?" "Alara." My mother stood, smoothing her silk blouse. "We were going to discuss this with you properly." "When?" "After you'd already signed everything over to Sarah." Jackson straightened, flashing that practiced smile. "Look, kid, sometimes in business you have to make tough decisions. Your sister's startup has real potential. Don't call me kid." I turned to my father, who remained behind his desk, expression unchanging. This is my money. I worked for it. A portion of it, yes, he said. But the bulk came from family funds, which I have the authority to reallocate as needed. Sarah's venture is a sound investment. Your art. It's a hobby, Alara. It's time to be realistic. The familiar ache of being the family disappointment twisted in my chest. Realistic? Like Sarah's 3 failed businesses were realistic? Or maybe like Jackson's can't-miss cryptocurrency scheme last year. That's enough. My father's voice sharpened. The decision is made. Perhaps this will motivate you to consider a more practical career path. Sarah stood, reaching for my arm. Oh, please. I promise once the business takes off. I jerked away from her touch. Save it. You've always been really good at promises, Sarah. Following through? Not so much. My mother stepped forward, arms outstretched. Darling, please try to understand. Family has to support each other. Support? I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. Is that what you call this? I backed toward the door, taking in their faces one last time. My father's stern disapproval, my mother's practiced concern. Sarah's perfect mask of sisterly worry, and Jackson's barely concealed smirk. In that moment, I saw them all clearly for the first time. You know what? Keep the money. All of it. But remember this moment, because things are going to change. And when they do, don't expect me to understand or support or adjust. Not anymore. I turned and walked out, ignoring my mother's calls. As I climbed the stairs to my room, my grandmother's words from last week echoed in my mind. Sometimes the worst betrayals come gift-wrapped in family loyalty. I hadn't understood then. I did now. Grandmother Miriam's Victorian house smelled like oil paints and coffee when I arrived with my hastily packed bags. She took one look at my face and wordlessly pulled me into her studio, where an empty canvas waited on the easel. Paint it out, she said, pressing a brush into my hand. I'll make us some tea. I stared at the white expanse until colors began flowing, dark reds and blacks, angry strokes that barely resembled anything. I was halfway through when the doorbell rang. Sarah's voice drifted up from downstairs, and my brush froze mid-stroke. Alara, Miriam called. Your sister's here. Should I send her up? I wiped my hands on my paint-stained jeans. Might as well get it over with. Sarah appeared in the doorway, perfectly put together as always in her designer outfit. You're being dramatic, Elle. Running away to Grandma's like we're in some teen movie. Dramatic. I turned back to my canvas, adding another slash of red. That's rich, coming from the queen of drama herself. I came to talk sense into you. She perched on the window seat, wrinkling her nose at the paint fumes. Dad's furious. Mom's beside herself. Just come home, apologize, and we can work something out. Work something out. The brush clattered as I dropped it. Like how you worked out taking my college fund. That money is going to benefit all of us, she insisted. Jackson has connections. This business venture. Stop. I faced her fully. Just stop pretending this is about family. You saw an opportunity and took it, just like always. The golden child gets whatever she wants. Something flickered across her face, guilt, maybe, or fear. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Dad's expectations, Jackson's plans. You're right. I don't understand. I don't understand how my sister could steal my future and act like she's doing me a favor. It's not stealing if. If what? If Dad approves? If it serves the mighty Winslow family legacy. I grabbed a rag, wiping paint from my hands with sharp, angry motions. Did you even think about me at all? Sarah stood, smoothing her skirt. Of course I did. I thought about how you're wasting your potential on this. She gestured at my paintings. Art doesn't pay bills, Elle. I'm trying to build something real. Real. I laughed. Like your boutique that lasted 3 months? Or that wellness coaching scam you tried last year? Those were learning experiences, she snapped, her perfect facade cracking. And at least I'm trying to make something of myself, not hiding in Grandma's attic playing with paints. Get out. Get out. She reached for her purse, then paused. You know what your problem is? You're so busy feeling sorry for yourself that you can't see opportunities right in front of you. Join the business. Work with me and Jackson. Be part of something bigger then. Then what? Then my childish dreams. I picked up my brush again, turning to the canvas. The answer is no. Now leave before I paint you into this mess, though you might actually look better in abstract. I heard her heels clicking away, then Miriam's voice downstairs, too low to make out the words. When the front door finally closed, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Miriam appeared in the doorway, 2 steaming mugs in her hands. Well, that sounded productive. She hasn't changed since we were kids, I said, accepting the tea. Still thinks she can smile and manipulate her way through anything. Miriam studied my painting, head tilted. Interesting use of red. Very violent. That's how betrayal feels. I touched the wet paint, letting it stain my fingertip. But I'm done being the family doormat. I'm going to find a way to make this work. My way. Good. Miriam smiled, a glint in her eye I'd never seen before. Because I have a proposition for you. Miriam's proposition turned out to be more explosive than I'd imagined. She'd handed me a manila envelope containing bank statements, loan documents, and emails. A paper trail that painted a devastating picture of my family's true financial state. Your father's company is hemorrhaging money, Miriam said as I spread the documents across her kitchen table. Has been for years. Those society parties, Sarah's failed ventures, your mother's spending habits, it's all smoke and mirrors. I stared at the numbers, my hands shaking. How did you get these? I may be old, but I'm not stupid. I've been watching Jackson since the day he married your sister. She tapped a document showing recent transfers. See these? Your college fund wasn't invested in Sarah's business. It went straight to covering margin calls on some very risky investments. The kitchen suddenly felt too small. Does Sarah know? I doubt it. She's too busy playing entrepreneur to notice she's being played. Miriam poured more coffee into my cup. Jackson's been systematically draining your family's resources, using Sarah's name to access accounts. Taking advantage of your father's desperation to maintain appearances. A text lit up my phone. Sarah, again. Need to talk. Important. Meet me at Café Laurent. Go, Miriam said, reading over my shoulder. But remember what you know now. The café was crowded when I arrived, but I spotted Sarah immediately, her perfect posture a beacon of privilege even here. She wasn't alone. Jackson sat beside her, his arm draped possessively across her shoulders. Elle, thanks for coming. Sarah's smile was brittle. We wanted to discuss your future. My future? I settled into the chair across from them, noting how Jackson's fingers drummed against the table, a tell I'd noticed whenever he was working an angle. We've been talking, he said, leaning forward, and we think we can help you. There's a position opening up in our new venture. Entry-level, but with real potential. What kind of position? Administrative assistant, Sarah jumped in. You'd be working directly with me, learning the business from the ground up. I took a slow sip of water, remembering the documents spread across Miriam's table. And what business is that, exactly? We're acquiring distressed properties, Jackson said smoothly. Renovating them for profit. Your artistic eye could be valuable for the design aspects. Interesting timing, I said, considering the real estate market's current state. Something flickered in Jackson's eyes, surprise, maybe concern. What do you mean? Just that property values in this area have dropped significantly. Seems risky. Sarah shifted uncomfortably. How would you know about? I've been doing research. I cut in, watching Jackson's fingers drum faster. Lots of research. Look, kid. Jackson's voice hardened slightly. This is a legitimate opportunity. But if you're not interested... Oh, I'm interested. I stood, placing my palms flat on the table. I'm interested in how you convinced my father to sink his company's emergency reserves into your schemes. I'm interested in where my college fund really went. And I'm really interested in what the SEC would think about your creative accounting. Sarah's face went pale. Elle, what are you talking about? Ask your husband. I grabbed my bag. Or better yet, ask Dad why he's been selling off assets to cover Jackson's losses. You don't know what you're dealing with, Jackson warned, all pretense gone. Neither do you. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Sarah? You might want to check those joint accounts you opened. The ones Jackson insisted would simplify your finances? I'd do it soon. Very soon. Walking away, I heard Sarah's confused questions and Jackson's increasingly defensive responses. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. For the first time since that day in my father's study, I felt powerful. Miriam was right. Knowledge wasn't just power, it was ammunition. The fallout came faster than I expected. 3 days after the cafe confrontation, I found Sarah on Miriam's doorstep at midnight, mascara streaking her cheeks. Behind her sat 2 designer suitcases. He cleaned out our accounts, she said, voice cracking. Everything's gone. I let her in, watching her collapse onto Miriam's antique sofa. When? This morning. I went to buy coffee and my card was declined. She laughed, a hollow sound. Can you believe that? I couldn't even buy coffee. Miriam appeared in her silk robe, taking in the scene. I'll make tea. I don't want tea, Sarah snapped, then immediately deflated. I'm sorry, Grandma. I don't know what to do. I perched on the armchair, studying my sister. The perfect mask had cracked, revealing something I'd never seen before: fear. "Did you talk to Dad? He won't take my calls." Sarah twisted her wedding ring. "Mom says he's handling it, whatever that means." But I heard her crying in the bathroom. Miriam returned with 3 steaming mugs and a folder. "Perhaps it's time we showed her, Alara." I hesitated, but Sarah was already reaching for the documents. As she read, her face went from pale to ashen. "This can't be right," she whispered. "Dad's company. Our house. Everything. Jackson's been planning this for years," I said. "You were just his way in." She looked up sharply. You knew and you didn't tell me. Would you have believed me?" I met her gaze. "When have you ever believed anything that didn't fit your perfect narrative?" "Girls," Miriam interrupted softly. "The past won't help us now. We need to focus on what comes next." "What comes next?" Sarah's laugh was bitter. "My husband's gone, my money's gone, our family's falling apart. What could possibly come next?" I stood, walking to the window. Outside, the city lights blurred in the rain. We could let it all burn down. Watch Jackson destroy everything and walk away with the ashes. Or, Sarah's voice was small, or we fight back. I turned to face them. "But if we do this, we do it my way. No more family politics, no more golden child versus black sheep. Just truth. Your way." Sarah set down her tea. "What does that mean?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The image that appeared made my blood run cold. A photo of my art school application, sitting on what was clearly Jackson's desk. "He's at the house," I said. "In Dad's study." Sarah stood, peering at the phone. "Why would he?" "Because he knows we have evidence against him." I deleted the message. "He's looking for the originals." "But why your art school application?" "Because that's not all it is." I met Miriam's knowing gaze. "The application was a cover. I've been gathering proof, building a case. Everything's hidden in plain sight, disguised as portfolio pieces and essays." Sarah sank back down. "You've been planning this?" "I learned from the best." I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. "You taught me well, sis. Always have a backup plan, right?" The silence stretched between us until Miriam cleared her throat. "The question isn't what Alara's been planning. The question is, are you ready to help her, Serafina?" Sarah looked from me to Miriam, then back to the documents in her lap. Finally, she slipped off her wedding ring and placed it on the coffee table. "Tell me what you need me to do." "First," I said, "you need to understand something. This isn't about revenge anymore. It's about justice. And justice isn't always pretty. Neither is family," Miriam added quietly. "But here we are." Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, and I watched my sister's reflection in the window, wondering if I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life, or finally set things right. The art school acceptance letter arrived the same morning as the news about Dad's arrest. I stood in Miriam's kitchen, clutching both pieces of paper, while Sarah paced behind me. "Securities fraud," she read from her phone. "Embezzlement. Dad's face is all over the financial news." She paused. "Jackson's name isn't mentioned anywhere." "Of course not." I set down the acceptance letter. "He made sure Dad would take the fall." "The police are at the house," Miriam said, hanging up her phone. "Your mother's hysterical. They're seizing computers, files. My portfolio." The realization hit like ice water. All the evidence is hidden in my artwork at the house. Sarah grabbed her keys. "I'll drive." We arrived to find police cars lining our circular driveway. Mom stood on the front steps in her silk robe, mascara streaking her face as officers carried boxes past her. When she saw us, her expression hardened. "You," she pointed at me. "This is your fault. If you hadn't started digging." "If I hadn't started digging, Jackson would have taken everything anyway." I pushed past her, heading for the stairs. An officer blocked my path. "Sorry, miss. This is an active crime scene. My art supplies are upstairs. Personal items. You can't just." "Actually, we can." A man in a suit appeared, badge glinting. Especially since several of those art pieces contain financial documents hidden in the frames. The room went silent. Mom's hand flew to her throat. "What is he talking about, Alara?" "Ask your son-in-law," I said. "He figured it out before you did." "Miss Winslow," the detective continued, "we'd like you to come downtown to answer some questions." Sarah stepped forward. "She's not going anywhere without a lawyer." "Interesting you should mention lawyers." He consulted his notebook. "Your husband came to us this morning with quite a story. Claims your sister here has been stealing company documents, manipulating evidence." "That's ridiculous," Miriam snapped. "Is it?" Mom's voice was ice. She's always been jealous of Sarah's success. Always trying to prove something. I laughed, the sound sharp enough to make them all flinch. Success? Is that what we're calling it now? Your golden child married a con man who just destroyed our family. But sure, let's talk about my jealousy. Ladies, the detective interrupted. We can continue this discussion downtown. Wait. Sarah pulled out her phone, fingers flying over the screen. Check your email, detective. You'll find recordings of every conversation between Jackson and his partners for the past 3 months, including the one where he planned to frame my father. The detective's phone buzzed. He frowned at the screen. I may have been blind, Sarah continued, but I'm not stupid. Once Alara showed me the truth, I started gathering my own evidence. Mom sank onto the stairs. Sarah, what have you done? The right thing. Finally. She turned to the detective. There's more where that came from. But first, my sister gets immunity. And we need access to her artwork. The real evidence is there, not whatever forgeries Jackson planted. The detective studied us both, then nodded to his officers. Let them upstairs. Supervised. As we climbed the stairs, I whispered to Sarah, Why didn't you tell me about the recordings? You're not the only one who can play chess. She squeezed my hand. Besides, some of us learned manipulation at Mom's knee. In my room, I went straight to the large canvas hanging above my bed. My first abstract piece, layers of paint hiding a wealth of damning documents. As I reached for it, Sarah touched my arm. The acceptance letter, she said quietly. What are you going to do? I stared at the painting, seeing beyond the surface to the truth it concealed. First, we take down Jackson. Then I paint my own future. The detective cleared his throat behind us. Time's running out, ladies. No, I said, carefully lifting the canvas from the wall. It's just beginning. 6 months after Dad's arrest. I stood in the gallery surrounded by my work. Paintings that had once hidden evidence now stripped bare and reimagined. The exhibition was my triumph, my declaration of independence. Until I saw them walk in. Mom, wearing her society smile like armor. Dad out on bail, looking smaller in his off-the-rack suit. And between them, Jackson, radiating smug confidence despite the pending investigations. Quite a turnout, he said, approaching my featured piece. A massive canvas of fractured family photographs, distorted and bleeding into chaos. Though I'm surprised they let you keep the originals, considering their evidence. These are new works, I said, keeping my voice steady. The originals are with the FBI. About that. He lowered his voice. Your father's lawyer thinks a deal might be possible. Drop the charges, return certain documents. The family could be whole again. Is that why you're here? To threaten me? To make peace? Mom stepped forward, her perfume too strong in the crowded space. Darling, hasn't this gone far enough? Your father's reputation was destroyed by him. I nodded toward Jackson. Or did you forget who orchestrated everything? Actually, Dad spoke for the first time. Jackson's been instrumental in organizing my defense. He's found investors willing to help rebuild. A laugh escaped me, sharp and bitter. You still don't get it, do you? He's playing you just like before. Where do you think those investors' money will really go? That's enough. Mom gripped my arm. You're making a scene. Good. I pulled away. It's about time someone did. Think carefully, Alara. Jackson's smile never reached his eyes. Your scholarship, your place in this gallery. Everything can disappear so easily. Ask your sister. My blood froze. What about Sarah? Haven't you heard? She's been having such a difficult time lately. Stress, anxiety. These things can be dangerous in her condition. Before I could respond, Miriam appeared beside me. I believe it's time for you all to leave. Mother. Mom started, but Miriam cut her off. Now, Lillian. Before I call security, or better yet, the detective handling Jackson's case. They left, but Jackson lingered. Beautiful work, truly. Especially that one. He pointed to a small piece in the corner. The only painting that wasn't part of the main exhibition. Sarah always said you had a gift for capturing hidden things. After they were gone, I rushed to the painting he'd indicated. It was an old piece, one I'd done years ago of Sarah in the garden. But something was wrong. The texture was different, the strokes too precise. It's not mine, I whispered. This isn't my painting. Miriam examined it closely. Look at the signature. In the corner, barely visible. Not my usual signature, but a date and time. Tomorrow, midnight. He switched it, I said. He's been in the gallery. Which means the evidence in your other paintings might not be safe either. Miriam's face was grim. Call Sarah. But Sarah didn't answer. Her phone went straight to voicemail, just like it had for the past week. I thought she'd been avoiding me because of the exhibition. Now, he has her, I said, the reality crushing down. That's what he meant about her condition. He knows she's pregnant, and he's using it against us. What are you going to do? I stared at the painting, at the hidden message meant to lure me into what was obviously a trap. Everything I'd worked for was in this gallery. My future, my freedom, my revenge. But Sarah, I'm going to meet him, I said. And this time one of us isn't walking away. Miriam touched my arm. You know it's a trap. Yes. I pulled out my phone, dialing the detective's number. That's counting on it. The old boathouse loomed dark against the midnight sky, its weathered boards creaking in the wind off the lake. I approached slowly, phone recording in my pocket, wire uncomfortable against my skin. The detective's words echoed in my head. Don't engage. Just get him talking. Sarah's voice drifted out through the broken windows, weak but alive. Elara, don't. Shut up. Jackson's sharp command cut her off. Come in, sister dear. Family reunion time. I pushed open the door. Moonlight filtered through gaps in the roof, illuminating Sarah tied to a chair, her face tear-streaked but defiant. Jackson stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder, the other holding something I couldn't quite see. The police are coming, I said. Of course they are. He smiled. But they won't find anything here except a tragic accident. Two sisters fighting over family secrets. Maybe one falls into the lake. Maybe both. You really think anyone will believe that? They believed everything else. His grip tightened on Sarah's shoulder. Your father believed I was his savior. Your mother believed I could restore their reputation. Even you believed your little evidence collection would work. Sarah's voice shook. The paintings in the gallery, he switched them all. The real ones are. In a much safer place, Jackson finished. Insurance, let's call it. Now about those FBI files. I don't have them. Don't lie to me. His composure cracked. I know how you work. Hidden compartments, secret panels, you wouldn't trust anyone else to keep them. A floorboard creaked behind me. I didn't turn. You're right. I wouldn't trust anyone else. That's why I gave them to Sarah weeks ago. Jackson laughed. Nice try. But she's been with me. For the past week, Sarah interrupted, strength returning to her voice. But not before that. Not when Elara showed me what you really are. Not when I started recording everything. His face contorted. You're bluffing. The necklace you gave me for our anniversary? Sarah smiled through her tears. Amazing what they can hide in jewelry these days. Every conversation, every threat, every plan, all transmitted directly to my private server. Which the FBI now has access to, I added. Check your phone, Jackson. Breaking news should be hitting right about now. He pulled out his phone with his free hand. As he read, his face drained of color. That's impossible. The accounts were untraceable. Unless you know where to look. Miriam stepped out of the shadows, her cane tapping against the wooden floor. Did you really think you were the first person to try this scheme? I've been protecting this family from men like you for longer than you've been alive. Jackson's hand moved, metal glinting in the moonlight. Stay back. Or what? I took a step forward. You'll shoot us all. Add murder to your fraud charges? You don't understand, he snarled. I built this. Everything I took, I earned. You people with your privilege, your connections, you never appreciated. The gun went off as Sarah threw herself sideways, chair and all. I lunged forward. We crashed together, the gun skittering across the floor. Outside, sirens wailed. You're right, I gasped, pinning him down. We never appreciated what we had. But you taught us something valuable. Yeah, he struggled, but Sarah's recordings had made him sloppy, desperate. What's that? Family isn't about blood or money. I met Sarah's eyes as the police burst in. It's about who you choose to protect. As they led him away, Sarah gripped my hand. I'm sorry. For everything. I know. I helped her up, watching Miriam direct the officers to gather evidence. We both have a lot to make up for. Where do we start? By telling the truth. All of it. Together. 1 year later, I stood in Miriam's studio, helping her sort through old paintings. My latest exhibition had just closed. A series exploring family bonds, healing, and forgiveness that had earned critical acclaim. But this moment, quietly working beside my grandmother, felt more significant than any gallery opening. Found something interesting, Miriam said, pulling a leather-bound journal from behind a stack of canvases. I think it's time you read it. The journal was my grandfather's, a man I'd never met. As I read, my hands trembled. Page after page detailed a familiar story. Family manipulation, financial deceit, broken trust. But it wasn't just a record of pain. It was a blueprint for healing, written in my grandmother's careful annotations in the margins. You knew, I said. All along, you knew this would happen. History has a way of repeating itself. Miriam settled into her favorite chair. But so does strength. The doorbell rang. Sarah entered, her baby bump now visible beneath her simple dress. No more designer labels or perfect poses, just my sister, real and raw and trying. Dad's sentence came through, she said without preamble. 5 years with possibility of parole. I nodded, unsurprised. And Mom? Still in denial. But she's seeing a therapist. Sarah managed a small smile. Baby steps. Speaking of babies, I gestured to the corner where my newest painting stood covered. I finished it. Sarah pulled back the sheet, revealing a portrait of her surrounded by swirling colors. Not the perfect society daughter she'd once been, but the complex, flawed, resilient woman she was becoming. Tears welled in her eyes. It's beautiful, she whispered. But I don't deserve. It's not about deserving. I touched the canvas where the colors merged and separated. It's about becoming. Miriam cleared her throat. There's something else you both should see. She opened the journal to its final pages. Your grandfather didn't just document his struggles. He left something for the future. We read together, details of hidden accounts, investments made decades ago, grown steady and strong like roots beneath the surface. Not a fortune, but enough. Enough for art school, enough for a fresh start, enough for a baby's future. He knew someday the family would need a reset, Miriam explained. A chance to build something new from the ashes of the old. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Sarah asked. Because you needed to find your own strength first. Miriam stood, touching each of our faces in turn. Money without wisdom is what got us here in the first place. Later, as sunset painted Miriam's studio in shades of gold, I added my own entry to the journal. Not about revenge or justice, but about the harder path of reconstruction. About how sometimes the deepest wounds become the strongest bonds. About how family isn't just what you're born into, but what you choose to build. Sarah appeared in the doorway. Jackson's sentencing is next week. Will you come with me? Of course. I closed the journal. But first, I need your help with something. I'm starting an art program for at-risk youth. Kids who need to find their voice. Like we did. Like we're still doing. I smiled. Want to help teach them how to paint their own stories? She picked up a brush, turning it thoughtfully. I think I'd like that. As we began clearing space for the new project, I caught Miriam watching us, satisfaction in her eyes. She'd known all along that true revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about creation. About taking broken pieces and making something beautiful, something true. Something that would last.